Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So today I got a fun and exciting episode for you guys today, and even though I'm using the guise of the unported playlist to bring it to you, it is something of particular note. Previously on the channel, more than once I've talked about both Planet Harriers, an absolute hidden gem Sega game that no one can play anymore, as well as the Sega Hikaru arcade hardware, which is one part souped up Dreamcast or NAOMI, and another part completely bespoke 3D hardware. And I've told people, even showed you on camera, how incredibly delicate the hardware is. If you look at it the wrong way or you don't whisper sweet nothings into its ear, it grenades itself and it will never work again. So basically almost all of the games on Sega Hikaru hardware are lost to time unless you can find an original arcade cabinet, and that is becoming exceedingly rare. We're talking unicorn status as of today. And even though I've shown you emulation for Sega Hikaru and Planet Harriers in the past, the issue was it was incomplete, and something like Demule, the emulator that actually supported Hikaru, was basically guaranteed to freeze on the third level, and that was just kind of where it was left, because Demule is no longer in active development, and even though we have stuff like Flycast, no one has really picked up the Hikaru emulation mantle at this point in time and run with it. So basically you could only get to mid-stage on Planet Harriers. In the third stage it would freeze, and that was all you could see. Up until yesterday, one of the members of my Discord, Anime Fanatic 781, started digging through old Demu builds and trying to figure out exactly what the issue was and how to work around it and solve it, and that's exactly what they did. There was a plugin issue combined with an actual version issue, and that's what was causing the freezing on the third stage of the game. So what I am doing is I am wrapping this all up and will be hosting it on my Discord server, so if you want to play Planet Harriers from start to finish, as of today we have figured out exactly how you do that. It is stable, I have tested it, other people have tested it, and you are good to go. And big thanks to the Cool Pup, one of the moderators of my Discord channel, for helping with some of the captures here as well. And this is fundamentally important because, trust me, if you know where there's a Planet Harriers arcade cabinet out there, go make an offer for me and ship it to me. I'd absolutely love to own it. Because sadly, in my opinion, one of Sega's best games is also one of their most impossible games to play, being Planet Harriers, and the Hikaru didn't get a ton of releases, but it got a lot of intriguing releases, things such as Brave Firefighters, which is basically a light gun game where you play as a firefighter trying to actually put fires out and save humans. Again, that cabinet is going to be unicorn status rare, and that is the bummer about Hikaru stuff. So many of the games just aren't on arcade floors anymore. Even private collectors have a ton of trouble actually keeping these things alive. If you're wondering why that was, basically when they manufactured these things, all of the ball grid array chips, the silicon for all of the 3D, had an issue on it. Basically, you have to both tin the pads on the motherboard as well as apply the solder balls on the chip, so when you marry them together they have a strong bond. While the developers and engineers forgot to actually tin the arcade PCB, so when they actually soldered those chips on, the fusion wasn't very good whatsoever. So the wrong bump and the wrong knock and those chips just absolutely fly off the board, and now you're talking about trying to reball a bunch of custom Sega chips. It is not easy in any way, shape, or form. It would probably cost more to actually get done unless you taught yourself and bought the equipment than the board is actually worth in value. And I've tried to buy two different PCBs of this in the past. One time someone shipped it like garbage and it was completely destroyed in the box. The other time, unfortunately, the seller had a good unit, and when he was getting ready to put it in the box, dropped it on the floor and broke it. Of course, they refunded me immediately, but this is basically my white whale of arcade PCBs. I've always wanted a Planet Harriers board, and I am still looking for it. But now when you get into stage 3, you can actually play the game to see the credits scroll, because right about now this is where it would always freeze. It would throw up a video error, and that was as far as you could ever get in the game. But now that just isn't the case in any way, shape, or form, and that is absolutely spectacular. And I love to see stuff like this in emulation, people kind of poking around and trying to figure out what isn't working and how can we make it work better so these games are more available for everyone to enjoy in the future. So again, Anime Fanatic 781, a constant member of my Discord, absolutely nailed the brief on this one. He just kind of went in and figured out what was going on. And as far as the soundtrack quality is concerned, in emulation it is quite good, getting to the first soundtrack sample, but I'll be right back with a ton more Planet Harriers. mean, the soundtrack's pretty good, but you can obviously tell that the sound emulation is not 100% completed, so don't go into Planet Harriers expecting this to be perfection, but the reality is the only other time I've ever got this far in the game is when I played it in arcades probably 15 or 16 years ago. I saw it once, I credit fed it, I saw the credits scroll, and from there I've never been able to actually play the entirety of Planet Harriers ever since. There were so many different versions of Demule, but unfortunately every single one I tried had an issue where it would freeze on stage 3. Now additionally, there is a special sound DLL file as well to get sound working in this build, and again, those are all going to be hosted on my Discord. So if this is something you want to check out, not just for Planet Harriers, but for Demule in general and Hikaru emulation, just pop over, the link is in the description below. But it's just so much fun to see this level again. I had vague memories of how the game actually went, and of course there are a few real gameplay captures on YouTube, but try as I might over the last 5 or 6 years, I've still not tracked down a working Hikaru motherboard for any of the games. That's the thing. I know a lot of people that own them and they are broken, but actually trying to find someone who has a working one who's willing to part with it is so incredibly hard. And this hardware is so delicate, it is the type of thing you probably want to completely avoid shipping it. If there was one 5 hours away and they were willing to sell, I would hop in my car, drive out there, pack it carefully, and then transport it back to Chicago until I could actually fix the board to try to keep it alive longer. And how that is done is you basically hot glue the ever-loving shit out of the PCB and all of those chips on top of it, so that way they are protected a little bit more. And while you could totally reball some of the pop silicon, it's one of those things I've never actually seen anyone do it, and the one person I know that does reball work on Sega hardware won't touch Hikaru because they just find it to be too much trouble. But you'll see here as we're into the next stage, the game looks absolutely stunning, and that's because the Hikaru was an extremely powerful piece of hardware, so much so that it was a little bit too expensive and Sega never made that many games for it. Like I said, it's using the same CPU as something like the NAOMI 2 or the Dreamcast or original NAOMI, but on the actual 3D hardware side of things, it is using custom silicon, and you'll see here that definitely is not how the game is supposed to look. So it's one of those things, don't expect perfection, you won't be disappointed. Expect to have some fun and see a very rare Sega game that's never been ported home, and you'll be 100% stoked for it. And this is the type of game I would love to see pop into Like a Dragon or Yakuza, depending on what you want to call it, in one of the arcades. But it might be one of those things, Hikaru emulation might even be difficult for Sega, or they might not think it's worth it compared to all of the Sega Model 2 and Model 3 games and even NAOMI games out there. So this may be as good as it ever gets, because at this point in time, I don't know anyone who is working actively on Hikaru emulation, because it doesn't have that many games, it is quite complicated, and because it isn't one of those things that a ton of people want to support, it might just never happen. So being able to at least play Planet Harriers from start to finish and see the credit scroll is one of the gold standards of emulation as far as I'm concerned. Pun very much intended, because we're stacking up those gold bars as far as power-ups go, and Planet Harriers is just an awesome game. I remember the first time I played this, I absolutely fell in love with it, and I definitely wanted to check it out more and collect an arcade board for it, but still to this day I just have never managed to do so. But even if the emulation isn't perfect, even if the graphics can be a little bit glitchy, this game is still every bit as fun as I remember it, and that is an amazing thing. And like I said, trying to actually get this thing to get past stage 3 was an impossibility up until about 24 hours ago when Anime Fanatic 781 figured out exactly how to do it. But one more soundtrack sample because it is quite good, and I'll be right back with a bit more.
Get ready. Go!
I mean, it sounds like Planet Harriers, and honestly that's all you could really ask for, and obviously development has gotten into this long before Anime Fanatic 781 figured out the problem, but it was one of those things, the crash was consistent enough, it seemed like there was some sort of issue on a call on the video plug-in, and basically Demio was like, we can't figure out what we're supposed to do, so the thing we're going to do is just absolutely kill the process, shut it all down, and crash out on the game. And even here you can see sometimes you can still get a few video glitches, and unfortunately because Demio is not in active development and it wasn't open source, people can't really jump into the source code for Hikaru Emulation and try to make it any better. Hopefully, maybe the developers one day hand the code over to MAME, that way they can incorporate it into their emulator and people could actually work on this a bit more. Because the unfortunate part is, even if the Flycast devs wanted to start working on Hikaru Emulation, they'd basically have to start near from scratch and do the entire thing over again. While I 100% think it's worth it, I understand that there's other things in Dreamcast and NAOMI and even NAOMI to emulation that would yield more results for the amount of work that would go into something like Hikaru. Because again, there's not a ton of games on the board. Some of them were absolutely incredible, but the numbers are just minimal. But Planet Harriers is just one of those games. It's so wild to think that a release in the Harriers franchise from Sega is so incredibly rare, and if you do know where there is an arcade board or cabinet out there, leave me a comment down below, because you guys always seem to know where there is something that I'm not quite sure of. If it is close, maybe I'll take a drive out and see, at least if I can play it and not if I can offer the arcade some money to take the thing home with me, because I really do still want this in my collection. I've got so many awesome Sega arcade games, but this is one I'd absolutely love to have. But again, it's just so fun to be able to actually see these levels, because I haven't seen the 4th and 5th stage of Planet Harriers for probably 15 years. I think the last time I played this was maybe something like 2009 or 2010 out west, when I saw it in an arcade when I was out there on work. And I've always wanted to play the thing again because I didn't have enough time to actually go through a second run. And while this isn't something that's going to be perfect, you're going to get an exact understanding of what the game was. You're going to be able to enjoy it, you're going to be able to play it, and you're going to see a decent amount of what Sega Hikaru hardware actually looked like. Just think maybe if there was a Dreamcast 2 on the market and it decided not to be based on NAOMI 2 but Hikaru, this is the level of graphics you could have been getting in something like 2001 and 2002. It's highly stylized Sega, and we always love that. And if that just isn't the Death Star in the background, I don't know what it is. But again, if you want to check this out, go ahead and join my Discord server. The link is down below. People will be willing to give you help if you run into any issues. Just remember to ask nicely and be patient, because nobody's over there full time working for me. No one gets paid to do these things, so if it takes them 6-8 hours to respond to you, or even a day or two, just be cool with it. We're happy to help. We just need some time. But we're done here, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.